Like and subscribe right now, or else this will be in your bed tonight. r/AskReddit by Planet Reddit. What is the craziest it's a small world moment you've ever experienced? My sister, my brother and I ran into each other randomly at a gas station nowhere near where any of us lived. Then my mom called my cell phone. It was a spontaneous family reunion. I was being trained in a new job. I found out the guy training me not only lived in the same apartment building I had lived in, but he moved into the exact apartment that I moved out of right when I moved out. We laughed about that. Then he told me he liked the apartment and the building except the elevator smelled like piss. The elevator smelled like piss because it was the slowest elevator on the planet and I had been on it one night after getting wasted and pissed my pants waiting for it to get to the right floor so I could use the bathroom. Did you piss in the elevator more than once? First time I went to Japan, an older woman asked me for directions in Tokyo. Because I looked like I could speak English, I heard a faint German accent in her voice and just said, in German, "We can just speak German if you like." We got talking and not only do we both come from Germany, not only do we live in the same city, we live on the same street. We still sometimes wave at each other when we meet at the corner shop. When's the wedding though? Dude, we are German. It's a miracle to me that they acknowledge each other's existence at that store. I'm an American. When I was 16, I visited Germany with my family and I was trying to buy some hot cider at a Christmas market. But I was struggling to communicate with the older lady at the cash register. A girl behind me, probably mid to late 20s, helped me translate and then helped me pick out coins. She spoke perfect English without even a trace of an accent. I mentioned that I wouldn't even know she was German because she spoke exactly like an American. And she laughed and told me that she studied abroad in America for a year when she was much younger. We got to talking details. And it turns out that she actually studied in my state, in my city, at my high school, and lived with my, at the time, boyfriend's family. The random lady in line behind me at the register. She likes that you think she was a random lady. At last my elaborate plan is 3/4 complete. My best friend randomly found my driver's license. My wallet was stolen a year beforehand, in her dorm roommate's things. I've never met her roommate and they went to a college 5 hours away. Turns out her roommate stole my wallet and but held onto my driver's license. A year later she was randomly matched with my best friend as a roommate. My best friend suspected her roommate was stealing from her. Went through her stuff and instead found my driver's license. Did your friend end up confronting them directly? Or is this from conclusion? I'm not sure if my friend confronted them. But when I got my license back, I recognized it because it was an old picture. I took a new picture when replacing my license. I met and befriended 2 Americans while traveling Australia in 2003. Didn't really stay in touch that well over the years and pretty much lost touch after we went our separate ways. Then I bumped into both of them again in a random bar during a storm while traveling in Belize in 2012. They said it was the first trip they had taken together since their Australia trip 9 years earlier. 7 billion people in the world and nearly a decade later, I see the same 2 guys on the complete opposite side of the world. I actually bumped into my next door neighbors in Heathrow Airport. Neither of us knew we would be in London. We come from Sydney. I traveled to Japan for a summer and one of the people I met in passing was an architecture student. The following fall, I leave my apartment at the same time my neighbor across the hall does and lo and behold it's the same dude. We just stood there and looked at each other like, oh. Edit. At the time, I was living in West Virginia. Freaky. Okay, that's just. Once I was visiting a great uncle in another town I had never met and on the Greyhound there I sat next to some random dude. We ended up talking and getting along pretty well. He was also visiting a relative in town and he asked my number. I ended up refusing cause he was almost 10 years older than me but I didn't think he looked bad and I strongly considered it. Anyway, we part ways and I get to my uncle's house. He shows me to the guest bedroom and guess whose picture is in a photo frame in the room? It's the bus guy. Turns out he's my cousin. Le cousin's dangereux. I like the way the French think. I was waiting tables at a popular restaurant in Maryland. I was serving drinks to a table in the outdoor garden patio. Sat a beer down. The guy at the table started to tell an anecdote. And the man at the table behind them turned around and tapped him on the shoulder. Dude at next table. What the hell are you doing here? My beer customer. Me? I thought you were in Germany. Dude at next table. You're supposed to be in Australia. These guys met in Australia years ago and just randomly bumped into each other vacationing in the US. Why would these guys vacation in Maryland? They wanted to get crabs. Two of my best friends from high school are twins. Their parents were super paranoid about them getting in a car accident and dying. So they were never allowed to ride in the same car together. Ever. Their sophomore year of college, they went to different colleges in different states. While driving 2 hours to meet each other for lunch, they both got in a car accident on a crowded interstate. With each other. Luckily, they both survived. With only a few broken bones each. No way. They planned that out to duck with their parents. The real question is, are they now allowed to travel in the same car together? My mom left her home country as a refugee. She lost contact with all her friends after she left. 30 years later, her best friend, who also moved abroad, was trying to find her, so she went to my mom's aunt's house when they went back to visit their home country to get her contact information. My mom's aunt gave it to them and she called my mom. My mom reunited with her friend, and it turned the entire time my mom's best friend lived in the condo building next to ours in the same city and in the same country. They are now best friends again. I would lament the time lost, but be so joyous for what I have now. That's pretty insightful. Cocaine. Family story. My parents were in a bar in the US. And an a-hole at the bar was being really rude to the waitress. So my mom went over and scolded him. The next day my parents got on a plane to China. And the first day they are there, they go to a bar and the same rude a-hole is at the bar. Being a dong to another cocktail waitress. My mom went up to him and said, "Hey, remember me?" She should have pretended she was following him to check on him. I can't believe how rude you're being to that waitress. Am I going to have to follow you all around the world to keep you from making a complete ass of yourself everywhere? My boyfriend rented a basement from my boss. Then I moved in. Weird. Then boss's girlfriend moved in. Turns out boss's new girlfriend is an old friend of mine. Turns out boss's girlfriend and my boyfriend were neighbors when they were kids in Germany. We live in Canada. Both had military dads. Whenever anyone says anything remotely funny, is there a laugh track? I think you might live in a sitcom. I met a guy on Overwatch and we started playing Xbox together. We both lived in California, so we decided to meet up, and he lived down the street. I meet a guy playing virtual reality games and he lives in the UK. And I live in the US. One day I was talking to him on Discord and it turns out he was 10 minutes away from me on business. I met a dude in a gaming group from Arizona. 6 months later he told me he was coming to Michigan, so we should meet up, along with a few other group members who I had met in college. The nucleus of the group. I kinda laughed and was like, "Dude, Michigan is huge. And you're probably not going to be near us." No. Turns out his entire extended family owns most of the property around an inland lake 20 miles from me, and he vacations there every summer. When I was taking Calc 1, this girl asked the professor if he had an uncle named John who was called Jack and an uncle named Jack who was called John. The professor said that he did not. He came back in the next week. Turns out his father was also a math teacher. And he had those family members. The girl and the professor were some level of cousins. She dropped the class 2 weeks later. When I was in uni, this linear algebra prof comes up to me after re-adding my surname on the student list. Asks whether I'm related to Professor, my surname. Yep. He's my granddad, I reply. The guy loses it. Apparently he learned all he knows from my granddad. I don't know why you decided to put a Wikipedia link in for linear algebra. Though on that note, I had some of the same professors that my father had during my associates. I'm English and I went to Chicago for a week. I went into a Starbucks in a non-touristy area and sat at the table. From the table next to me an American guy says, "Hey Hannah. I believe I follow you on Twitter." Turns out we were both on a group video chat a few years ago with a musician that we both liked. Recognizing someone you only know from social media is always weird even if you don't live far away, so I can only imagine how strange that must have been. My mom works for an exchange student company and matched this one girl up with a family in our school district. Apparently she was a huge fan of this one girl who had a YouTube channel that was going to new old high school. So they got to be classmates. The weirdest part is that as far as I know she's not even a big name, so the chances of the other girl knowing the girl from my high school are pretty low. I grew up in Western New York and spent part of my college years in the small former mining town of Bendigo, Victoria, Australia. One weekend, I was traveling back to New York from Bendigo. Started out at the train station. Caught a glimpse of a very distinctive looking man in a suit, carrying a briefcase. He waited around at the platform and hopped on the train. We both climbed off in Melbourne. Not at all unusual. My flight didn't leave until the next morning. So I transferred on a shuttle to the airport and got a good night's sleep at the hotel next door. The next morning I once again saw the man. Still wearing the same suit. Okay. He had a flight too. Still not that unusual. I arrive in Los Angeles about 15 hours later and see him exiting the plane. We were both on the same flight. Starting to get unusual. But nothing unheard of. I see him yet again during my layover at the airport in Cleveland, Ohio. He is waiting at a gate for a departing flight to Detroit. So weird. We almost followed each other to the exact same place. While claiming my baggage and stepping outside, I spot a taxi pulling away. In the backseat is the same man, who quickly glances up at me and looks away again. Never saw him again. What if he was you from the future? Then he would have already known not to be in Bendigo at any points in history. Met and played Quake 3 with a guy back in 2002ish. After a year or so I quit playing and lose contact with him. Jump forward to 2007 and I move in with my dad in a different state. On the bus ride to school I hear some other guys talking about Xbox, and being a gamer I'm listening in. He gives the other guy his gamer tag and it's the same name of the guy I used to play Quake with all those years ago. We've been best friends ever since. I met one of my ex-best friends by talking shit to him on an online game. It got pretty heated and we quickly started talking where we were from as if we were gonna meet up. Found out he went to school with me and I saw him that very next day, and the whole situation was so surreal we just bonded off of it and were instantly buddies. He turned crazy as years went by though. What kinda crazy? Delusions. Thought everyone was secretly getting together and plotting on him. Would get crazy mad and make death threats over little shit, like if someone who cancelled to chill with him. He only treated the closest people to him like shit if he didn't get his way. As time went on I watched him lose everybody and eventually he had an outburst towards me and I said, "Sire." Running into a guy I know from a bar in Amsterdam somewhere in Ho Chi Minh City. And then running into him again a year later in Bangkok. I see you have a friendly stalker. Was traveling in Austria and ran into my best friend from high school late one night in an out of the way bar. We are from the US. Edit. Typo. This is crazy. Ended up being an epic night and next few days. One time I had a dream that I was in love with this absolutely adorable blonde girl I never met before. The next day I was putting the trash in the dumpster at 4 in the morning and I hear this tiny voice say, "Excuse me." This was really creepy, but I walked over to the fence and there she was. The girl from my dream. She asked for a cigarette so I obliged and never saw her again. I imagined an adorable 4-6 years old. Got confused at the end. Every time you see a face in dream, it's always a face you've seen before. Therefore, you've probably seen her before but haven't realized it. I was driving down the interstate in a small town 100 miles away from home. I look to the side of me where another vehicle is passing and notice that it's my next door neighbor. Oh. It's almost as if he was following you, haha. Haha. Being stuck on the Disney boat ride and hearing It's a Small World 45 times in the China section. Longest and smallest hour of my life. Could be worse. You could be the ride operator. As a ride operator at a Disney park. I agree. I am from the UK and was studying abroad. Living in Madrid. While I was there I met an Italian girl with the same birthday as me. Born in the same hospital hours apart in a city in the UK that neither of us live in anymore. Pretty cool. That happened to me in Bumbleduck, West Virginia. A girl at a gas station checked my ID. Birthday was the same. After a chat it was the same hospital at similar times. Both of our dads watched the World Series game on a TV in the waiting room. And both of us remembered that little tidbit. And it was kind of awkward, to be honest. I said something like "oh cool" and she came back with "how the duck did we get here?" I didn't know if it was deep or depressing or interesting. It was oddly thought-provoking. We came into the world minutes apart, maybe a couple rooms from each other for all I know. And then we meet again at a rundown gas station in the middle of Appalachia 20-something years later, 700 miles from home. A result of two completely separate paths in life. Weird. Me and my grandparents took a road trip to Moab in 2006 and we stopped in a RSE Colorado town on the way back. My grandfather and I were both big car nerds and he saw one of the new Dodge Chargers pull into the hotel. He was interested in getting one and went and talked to the owners. The next evening we pulled into a motel in Amarillo and parked to a new Dodge Charger. The same Dodge Charger. Nice people. I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and at the time that this happened, I had family living in Aberdeen, South Dakota. While we were out visiting family, we stopped at a restaurant called Pizza Ranch and ran into some people from my school back in Minneapolis. We didn't really know each other too well, but we definitely talked when we saw each other in SD. Fast forward 2 years. We'd go to the same Pizza Ranch and see each other again. My family and their family are now really close. Another thing worth noting. They ended up living a block away from us, which we didn't find out until the second meeting in SD. Let's see if we can discover another small world moment. Which school? Wayzata. While in Sydney, traveling, I met a guy in a hostel. Had a few drinks, nothing more. 6 months later I saw him in a really small town called Burke. Roughly 6 months after that I bumped into him on a small island called Shoman off Malaysia. I think every backpacker must have stories like this. I have one. Years ago, when I was backpacking across Western Europe, I was just outside Barcelona hiking in the foothills of Mount Tibidabo. I was at the end of this path and I came to a clearing and there was a lake. Very secluded. And there were tall trees all around. It was dead silent. Gorgeous. And across the lake I saw a beautiful woman bathing herself, but she was crying. Walmart always does it for me. I see everyone I know at Walmart. It's like a family reunion. The closest Walmart to my hometown is 4-6, depends on the weather, hours away. But every time I go and there's someone I know. I took a girl to a local coffee shop that a friend owns, hoping he was there and they could meet. He wasn't there and I told her that I'm sure they'd meet at some point. A few months later she asked me to describe my friend that owns a coffee shop, so I did and asked why. Turns out she met him at a destination wedding of mutual friends of her brother and the coffee shop guy that was happening in Puerto Rico. We live in Texas. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for 3 videos a day.